By 1982, more than 10 million American households owned the same small wood grain box. Inside it, a handful of switches and a slot for plastic cartridges. Plug one in, and the television in your living room could become a racetrack, a battlefield, a maze, or a tennis court. This box generated $2 billion in sales in a single year, up from $75 million just 5 years earlier. But the story of how this machine took over American living rooms is also the story of how the company that built it lost control of its own culture. Man who founded it. This is Atari Part 2. Act 1. The problem with arcades. By the mid-1970s, Atari had a problem that came with success. Every new arcade game required designing custom hardware from scratch. New circuit boards, new cabinets, new manufacturing runs. Each game was its own product, with its own limited lifespan before players moved on to the next thing. Nolan Bushnell wanted something different. A single piece of hardware that could play many different games, with new games sold separately, swappable cartridges, one console, infinite library. The technology to make this affordable didn't really exist yet. Then, in late 1975, MOS Technology released an inexpensive microprocessor, the 6502, that suddenly made a programmable home console financially realistic. Atari's engineering subsidiary, Cyan Engineering, began prototyping the console under the codename Stella. But building it, manufacturing it, and getting it onto store shelves at scale required serious money. More money than Atari, still a relatively young company, had access to. Act 2. The Warner years begin. In 1976, as covered in the previous episode, Bushnell sold Atari to Warner Communications for approximately $28 million. Bushnell stayed on as president, and Warner provided the capital to finish Stella. In September 1977, Atari released the console as the Atari Video Computer System, later renamed the Atari 2600. It launched at $199, bundled with 2 joystick controllers, a pair of paddle controllers, and a cartridge named Combat. Early sales were modest. The console competed with simpler single-game machines, and $199 was a serious purchase for most families in 1977. Then, in 1980, Atari released a home version of Space Invaders for the 2600. Space Invaders had already been a massive arcade hit. Bringing it home, letting people play the exact game from the arcade in their living room anytime they wanted, was a turning point. Sales of the 2600 console reportedly quadrupled. Suddenly, the format that seemed like a modest gamble looked like the future of the entire industry. Act 3. The Culture Clash. Atari, under Bushnell, had been a particular kind of company. Young engineers, informal dress, a famously loose, almost countercultural atmosphere. Hot tub meetings were not, to multiple accounts from the era, entirely a myth. Warner Communications was a media conglomerate built on film and music. It ran on a different rhythm. Quarterly earnings calls, organizational charts, dress codes. In 1978, Warner brought in an executive named Ray Kassar to help run the company. Over the following months, Kassar's role expanded from helping to leading. The cultures didn't mesh. Game designers, the people whose work was driving Atari's astronomical growth, were reportedly treated as replaceable factory labor rather than creative talent. Didn't disappear on game packaging. Bonuses tied to a game's sales went to executives, not to the people who built the games. Bushnell, meanwhile, found himself in direct conflict with Warner's leadership over the company's direction. including reportedly pushing for resources to go to Atari's next generation console rather than continuing to milk the 2600. In December 1978, that conflict came to a head. Bushnell left the company. Accounts differ on whether he was fired or chose to walk away, and Bushnell himself has told the story different ways over the years. What's not disputed is that by 1979, Atari's founder no longer worked at Atari. Act 4, the peak. Without Bushnell and under Kassar's leadership, Atari kept growing for a while spectacularly. By 1982, the 2600 controlled the overwhelming majority of the home console market. Annual sales had gone from $75 million in 1977 to over $2 billion. At its height, Atari was generating a significant share of Warner Communications' entire corporate profit. More than 500 games were eventually released for the 2600, everything from Missile Command and Pitfall to licensed tie-ins for Superman and Raiders of the Lost Ark. From the outside, Atari in 1982 looked unstoppable. A company that had started with $500 a decade earlier now anchored one of the largest media companies on Earth. From the inside, the cracks that had pushed Bushnell out hadn't gone away. They had just been papered over by growth. The disgruntled game designers Atari treated as anonymous factory workers didn't all stay quiet. Some of them, frustrated at receiving no credit and no royalties for games that sold millions of copies, would leave and found their own company. They'd call it Activision. That story is coming soon in this series, and it's one of the best corporate dramas in gaming history. As for Bushnell, he didn't slow down. His next venture combined two things that he understood deeply: arcade games and getting families to spend money on entertainment. He called it Pizza Time Theater. You know it today as Chuck E. Cheese. And Atari itself, sitting at the top of the world in 1982, the next year would bring a flood of cheaply made games, a market saturated past its breaking point, and a single Atari title based on a movie about a friendly alien that would become a symbol for everything that went wrong. That's the video game crash of 1983, and it's coming up.